Something very strange is happening within the world of football. Nope, I'm not talking about Anthony Gordon's hair here. I'm not even talking about Danny Ward's goalkeeping. I am referring, of course, to the crypto and NFT mania that has taken hold of the world's most popular sport. Wherever you look in football now, there is crypto. Manchester United's training kit is sponsored by Socios, which is a blockchain network. Chelsea's shirt sleeves are sponsored by Whalefin, a cryptocurrency trading platform, and even the VAR in Serie A is sponsored by Crypto.com, which means that the exchange website gets a shout out every time the video assistant referee decides to intervene during a game in the top flight of Italian football. Within about 5 minutes of my own club, Hull City, being acquired by Turkish businessman Acunil Ilıcalı, this logo started appearing everywhere, plastered on the back of shirts for promotional purposes, on the back of player shorts permanently, and all over the stadium. Lo and behold, Tomya, it turns out, who I would be willing to bet no one in Hull had ever heard of before they started sponsoring the football club, is a Turkish cryptocurrency trading platform, though good luck finding out anything else about them other than that. As with so many of these companies, whose money has flooded into the game at almost unprecedented speed, and with enormous volume, very little is known about them. Yet, 17 out of the 20 Premier League teams now have some kind of official cryptocurrency sponsors or partners. There is an English Football League team that is owned by American cryptocurrency investors, promising to take them all the way to the Premier League, and everyone from Neymar and Paul Pogba to Michael Owen and Bobby Zamora has taken to flogging NFTs, often seemingly to a very young audience, on social media. Both cryptocurrencies and NFTs are extremely polarizing, heralded by some as either being the future of finance and a long-term successor to fiat currencies, or alternatively, as a potentially lucrative investment, and scolded by others as an unregulated and environmentally destructive financial asset which has no underlying value. Whatever your views on crypto and NFTs though, even if you fall into the even larger subset of people who just have absolutely no idea what a blockchain or a non-fungible token even is, there can be no doubt that these technologies, and companies relating to them, have taken football by storm, and that their influence within the sport is likely to grow ever larger over the next few years. But what does it all mean? Why is it happening? And what are the potential pitfalls of football and digital currencies becoming so enmeshed? Well, in today's video, that is exactly what we are going to try and figure out. So sit back, relax, and join me on a journey from Silicon Valley to Southampton, with a couple of stop-offs in China and the metaverse, as we explore the marriage of football and cryptocurrencies, and whether it is likely to end happily ever after, or with one lover getting caught up in a massive affair and torching the house down with the kids still inside. That's a bit of a weird analogy, isn't it? Well, you get the idea. I mean, sure, we get the idea, but did it really have to be that graphic? Alright, you know, forget that I ever said anything about a torched house with anyone still inside. Let's just get into it. The coalescing of football and digital currencies could not have been much better timed. Whilst there were some clubs who already had crypto partners and sponsorship deals in place prior to the pandemic, and companies like Socios.com had already been founded, it was both during and after the outbreak of COVID-19 and the initial lockdowns that we saw across most of the world that the amount of money coming into football from the crypto, blockchain, and NFT space really started to explode. Two things happened during the pandemic. For a start, all football was temporarily suspended and later reintroduced without supporters being allowed to attend games. Crowds were restricted to either negligible or entirely non-existent for the best part of 18 months or a season and a half, costing clubs an enormous amount of revenue. For top Premier League teams, they missed out on as much as a third of their expected annual revenue in the 2020-21 campaign, and that figure was far higher for teams outside of the Premier League and further down the Football League pyramid. Whilst revenue fell off a cliff, in the vast majority of cases, players' salaries and valuations largely held up, meaning that clubs couldn't just reduce their spending, or at least not without risking falling behind the rest of the competition. As such, the only solution was to try and find alternative sources of revenue. Of course, football clubs, like all businesses, are doing this all the time, but they were particularly desperate and in need of a cash injection during this period. At the same time, throughout the pandemic, crypto and NFTs experienced a massive boom. Bitcoin, for example, which is the largest cryptocurrency by market capitalization, went from being valued at a little over £4,000 in the middle of March 2020, which is when much of the EU went into lockdown, to being valued at more than £44,000 by March 2021, a tenfold increase in the space of just 12 months. There was then a significant crypto crash during the summer of 2021, which saw the value of many cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, effectively cut in half or worse, but that was followed swiftly by a second boom as the world's most popular digital currency peaked at a valuation of more than £50,000 for a single Bitcoin in November 2021. Although the first NFT was minted, so to speak, back in 2014, it was only in 2021 that they entered the mainstream. In March 2021, the associated NFT for a digital piece of artwork entitled Every Days, The First 5,000 Days, by the digital artist Mike Winkelmann, sold for $69.3 million at an auction conducted by the British auction house Christie's. It was the first purely NFT artwork to be sold by a major auction house, and the sale price made Every Days the third most expensive piece of artwork to be sold by a living artist. That unsurprisingly brought an awful lot of attention to NFTs, and in May 2021, the 10,000-part Bored Ape Yacht Club series was released, reportedly generating just over $2 billion in sales for all 10,000 apes. That is how a lot of people first became aware of NFTs, and it is why a lot of people still associate NFTs with drawings of monkeys and apes, even though an NFT could be associated with almost anything. I mean, not the feeling of guilt or the concept of time, but a lot of things. Don't worry if this is all going straight over your head. We will come back to what all of this actually means and why anyone would be willing to pay thousands, if not millions of dollars or pounds for what is essentially a record on a blockchain which says that you own a certain digital asset such as a drawing of a cartoon ape. As the value of various cryptocurrencies skyrocketed, going to the moon, as a lot of crypto investors like to put it, and the NFTs attached to digital pieces of art began to be sold for truly astronomical sums, a lot of people became very rich almost overnight. Those stories inevitably filtered down outside of the existing crypto and NFT spaces, leading to a huge spike in interest in both, as millions of people were attracted to the prospect of making a lot of money in a very short period of time. An entire digital economy was therefore constructed in order to service this new demand, and also, obviously, to make the people setting up these businesses a lot of money as well. Crypto exchanges, crypto mining, and NFT marketplaces all started to shoot up, but all needed to get their brands out there and scoop up this rapidly growing market share. So the world of football needed money and was increasingly unfussy about where it came from. Meanwhile, this brand new, almost entirely unregulated industry began looking to market itself to the widest possible audience and was willing to throw huge amounts of money at these marketing campaigns. Throw in the fact that, whilst all of this was happening, government regulators in a number of countries, not least here in the United Kingdom and therefore concerning the Premier League, were becoming rather tetchy about gambling companies' involvement within football, with a strong suggestion that they could be banned from sponsoring football clubs and maybe even from advertising at football matches. And you start to see how it really could not have been much better timing for these crypto companies to enter the scene. I am talking about this almost as though it were a historical event when, in actual fact, we are talking about just the last couple of years and a trend which in many ways has only just begun. Whilst both Manchester United and Manchester City's training kits are already sponsored by cryptocurrency or blockchain firms, and the sleeves of Chelsea's match kits are sponsored by another cryptocurrency trading platform, we may be on the verge of crypto companies becoming even more omnipresent within the game, particularly if they are to take the place of the gambling firms. Currently, 9 out of the 20 Premier League teams' primary sponsors are either bookmakers, online casinos, or in some other way gambling related. Back in April, it was widely reported that Liverpool were in talks with a cryptocurrency firm about becoming their new front of shirt sponsors, in a deal which was reported to be worth more than £70 million over 2 seasons. That deal never materialised, after the Reds' existing shirt sponsors, Standard Chartered, were able to strike a new 4-year deal with the club worth £200 million. But it was surely a sign of things to come. Over in Serie A, Inter Milan and Roma both have the same front of shirt sponsors, namely Digital Bits, which, thankfully, is not a website where people trade digital artwork of their bits. Digital Bits, which is owned by the financial technology company Zytara Labs, describes itself as being an easy-to-use open-source blockchain used to power digital assets such as branded currencies, NFTs, stable coins and more. Zytara's 3-year deals with Inter and Roma are reportedly worth $100 million and $42 million respectively, but the biggest deal between an individual club and crypto firm to date can be found at Atletico Madrid. The Spanish giants struck a 5-year deal this summer, worth a total of €210 million with Whalefin, the cryptocurrency trading platform that is also paying £20 million a season to be Chelsea's shirt sleeve sponsors. Even in the Premier League, where Liverpool would have ostensibly become the first team to have explicitly had a crypto firm as their primary sponsors, Southampton have in effect been sponsored by a cryptocurrency company, or at least one that is heavily dependent upon cryptocurrencies, since 2020. The Coin Gaming Group have been the Saints' main club partner since stepping in at the 11th hour when the club humiliatingly had to terminate its partnership with Chinese firm LD Sports just 3 weeks before the 2020-21 season began. The Coin Gaming Group recently renamed themselves the YOLO Group and claim to sit at the convergence of the gaming, fintech, and blockchain sectors. One of the YOLO Group's brands, and the one with which it has chosen to advertise on the front of Southampton's shirts since 2020, is sportsbet.io. YOLO, who pay Southampton £7.5 million a year for the arrangement, also have advertisements all around St Mary's as part of their main club partner package, which has included displaying the message HODL around the club's ground, that is HODL, not like Glenn Hoddle, visible to fans in the stadium and also to those watching on television. HODL is a neologism that is very common within the crypto space, which some claim began with a drunken typo by a Bitcoin investor on an online forum many years ago, but is now commonly understood as being an acronym used to mean hold on for dear life. Essentially, it is a call to action to crypto investors not to sell their digital assets and currencies during a crash, when they might otherwise be tempted into doing so through fear of losing even more of their investment. Why a company would want to display that message at Premier League football matches, given that it is essentially meaningless to anyone who isn't already familiar with cryptocurrencies and has next to no company branding, is a question that has raised 1 or 2 eyebrows. Interestingly though, .io domains, which were originally country-specific to the British Indian Ocean Territory, but have become so common among tech startups that even Google now considers it to be a generic top-level domain, you cannot actually access the web address sportsbet.io, which is advertised on the front of Southampton's shirts, from the United Kingdom, or at least not without a VPN. Instead, you will be redirected to sportsbet.io.uk, which isn't even run by Sportsbet or the YOLO Group themselves at all. Sportsbet.io.uk is what is known as a white label website, which has a unique domain name, but is run by TGP Europe Limited, a company based in the Isle of Man that operates several similar white-label bookies, many of which are for other companies that sponsor Premier League teams. Those of you who saw my video about the mysterious companies who sponsor Premier League football teams will already be well aware of what I'm talking about. Essentially, companies like Fun88, who sponsor Newcastle United, or SpotUp, who sponsor Leeds United, do not have gambling licenses to offer gambling or casino services to consumers within the United Kingdom, so they outsource their company branding to TGP Europe, who do have a license and can offer that service for them. All of these companies' websites look pretty much the same, and they all almost certainly generate very little revenue in the United Kingdom, despite paying tens of millions of pounds to sponsor UK-based football clubs. That is because their target market isn't in England at all, but is in China, where gambling is illegal, and therefore advertising a casino or bookmakers is also illegal. Since the Premier League is extremely popular in China, these companies, many of whom are actually based in the Philippines, use English football clubs to circumvent Chinese advertising restrictions and to get their brands in front of Chinese consumers. That is why many of them also have their branding written in Chinese. Sportsbet.io, meanwhile, who also became Arsenal's official betting partners in 2020, have an added edge when it comes to targeting the Chinese market via the Premier League, since they are not just an online bookmakers, it is also a cryptocurrency betting website. Users gamble not with fiat currencies like dollars or pounds, but with their choice of more than 10 different cryptocurrencies that the website accepts. This is particularly appealing to gamblers in countries where gambling is illegal, since cryptocurrencies are virtually untraceable, unlike fiat currencies. It's a service which is not offered in the UK by bookmakers because the risk of facilitating money laundering and other illegal activities is considered to be too great. That is not to say that Sportsbet.io are technically doing anything illegal, they are not, and nor are Southampton in allowing them to use them to advertise their brand. But it certainly opens the Saints up to the potential risk of getting caught up in some kind of future scandal, as is the case with many of football's cryptocurrency sponsorship arrangements. Indeed, for some teams, that has already happened. Barnsley are one club who did have a cryptocurrency firm as their front of shirt sponsors, namely Hex.com, who they struck up a deal with over the summer. Hex is an Ethereum-based token or cryptocurrency whose logo was evidently far too big on both Barnsley's home and away shirts, though that isn't what caused the controversy, but it obviously should. Even by cryptocurrency standards though, Hex is unusually opaque, with a website boasting of enormous potential returns for investors with only very limited disclaimers about the potential risks, despite the fact that the value of Hex has actually plummeted over the last 12 months. When Barnsley fans began to ask one or two questions about the ethics of Hex, which has been accused of being a pyramid scheme, they were met with furious responses on social media from so-called hexicans, who are, as their name suggests, passionate advocates of the crypto coin. It turned into a bizarre online confrontation between supporters of the South Yorkshire Football Club and almost cult-like advocates of Hex, as all of Barnsley's official social media posts began to be flooded with comments from extremely aggressive Hex supporters. When Barnsley fans dug up homophobic tweets from people who weren't just Hex owners or fans, but were actually tied to the company, Barnsley decided to terminate the sponsorship just 2 games into the season. No doubt Barnsley felt that by turning away from local companies who had tended to sponsor the club over the years, in favour of a lesser-known business who offered more cash, they would be able to invest more in their playing squad and compete in the championship. The flip side is that, in failing to do their due diligence, and knowing, like everyone else, seemingly next to nothing about Hex, they have ended up going sponsorless on their shirts this season, missing out on any revenue at all. Hex are not alone in crypto sponsors to have attracted criticism. Manchester City's crypto partners, OKX, who sponsor their training kits, are currently under investigation in Canada for violating securities law and failing to comply with the registration and prospectus requirements under Ontario securities law, as was reported by Philippe Auclair in Josimar Football in July of this year. OKX, which was founded by Chinese entrepreneur Mingxing Zhu, was previously subject to an investigation in China as well, where the Chinese Communist Party has outlawed companies from dealing in crypto assets. Manchester City have been one of the Premier League's most proactive clubs when it comes to cryptocurrencies and so-called fan tokens, and their deal with OKX is reported to be worth $20 million a season to them. One of the primary services that OKX provides is the sale of crypto derivatives, which are considered to be so high risk that they are actually banned in the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, two of the adverts that Arsenal made in association with Socios in 2021 were actually banned by the UK's advertising regulator after it was deemed that they were misleading supporters over the risk of investing in cryptocurrencies. Socios describe themselves as the all-in-one fan influence and rewards app and claim that their app gets you closer to the team you love by allowing you, the superfan, to vote on club-specific decisions. Essentially, Socios market themselves as being a fan engagement platform where fans buy tokens for the club that they support, and in turn, they get a say in how certain decisions are made at that club. Crawley Town, England's first professional football club to be taken over by cryptocurrency investors, have implemented a similar system in the form of an NFT called WagMe United, attached to a 10-second video and available to purchase via OpenSea, which is the world's largest digital marketplace for NFTs. The Crawley Town owners believe that digital assets and NFTs can provide a vital revenue source for the club, which they claim will offer supporters a sense of ownership in the team. Though, as they also point out, they are not selling securities, as they put it. That is to say, they are selling a sense of ownership, but not any actual ownership at all. Yes, it would seem that in English football, actual fan ownership, well, that's all a little bit pie in the sky. But selling the idea of fan ownership and the illusion of equity and control by supporters over the fate of their own club, well, that could become all the rage. Crawley claim to have sold more than 10,000 NFTs back in July, a figure that is backed up by their stats on OpenSea, and to have raked in $4.8 million from the sale. That is pretty impressive going, assuming that it is true at least, for a club that competes in League Two. To put that in some perspective, the total average annual revenue for a League Two club is just £4 million. Though, it must also be said that Crawley's impressive digital asset sales haven't yet translated into impressive results on the pitch, as the Reds currently languish in 20th place in League One, 9 games into their current campaign. While Socios, who are currently partnered with 6 Premier League clubs, and Crawley Town's WagMe United NFTs claim to be all about fan engagement, evidence suggests that it is not primarily supporters of the clubs in question who are actually buying them, and the level of fan engagement that they offer is extremely minimal, to put it kindly. We are talking about things like the music that is played in the ground on a match day, the colour of the programmes, and the ratio of steak to kidney in the steak and kidney pies sold on the concourse. Alright, I made the last one up, but you get the general idea. These are relatively trivial issues, and I'm not saying that I expected Arsenal's fan token holders to be able to veto signings or vote on who should be Mikel Arteta's successor. I'm just saying that if I could vote on the colour of a Hull City programme, I wouldn't be feeling all that much closer to the club. Perhaps it is unsurprising, therefore, that many of the people buying these fan tokens are actually financial speculators and people who are more interested in cryptocurrencies than football and who are looking to make a quick buck, rather than your average season ticket holder or avid supporter. An investigation by Joey D'Urso at The Athletic, who has perhaps spent more time covering cryptocurrencies and NFTs, in terms of their involvement in football at least, than anyone else, found Telegram channels in which traders, who seemingly have zero interest in football or the clubs themselves, or certainly never mention them, would discuss pumping and dumping certain tokens or coins. Pump and dump schemes are as old as time, as investors look to drive up interest and demand in a financial asset, and therefore also inflate the price before getting out whilst prices remain high, and before it tanks. Observing the behaviour of several fan tokens, this seems to be a recurring theme. PSG's fan token, for example, shot up in value upon the news that Lionel Messi would be leaving Barcelona and was likely to sign for PSG before tanking after Messi actually signed. Atletico Madrid's fan token, similarly, saw a steep spike in value in the build-up to Diego Simeone's side winning the La Liga title, followed by an equally steep fall in valuation after the title had been confirmed. These are not the type of fluctuations in price that one would expect of a token that is being bought by committed fans who want to hold on to their tokens in order to have a say on certain issues at the club and decisions that they make. Socios have clearly invested an enormous amount of money into the world of football. Lionel Messi is the face of the brand. Until this season, they sponsored the front of both Inter Milan and Valencia's shirts, at a fee of €20 million a season, in the case of the Italians, and they are partnered with the likes of Juventus, Barcelona, AC Milan and PSG, as well as being the official fan token partner of UEFA, which sees them advertise the UEFA Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League. For the clubs and competitions that are partnered with Socios, it is, once again, viewed as being very easy money. Creating a fan token is not very capital intensive because, crucially, nothing tangible has actually been created. Any revenue, therefore, which is split between Socios and the clubs themselves, is profit, and as we have already established, revenue is something that football clubs have been badly in need of over the last few years. The same goes for NFTs, where you have both a club and a player aspect. Liverpool, for example, recently released a collection of NFTs listing 171,072 unique images for sale, made up of 7,128 unique customizations based upon each of their 27 players, plus Jurgen Klopp. Each NFT was listed for $75, which is about £65, though it was closer to £57 at the time of their release, before the pound crashed. That meant that if Liverpool sold all 171,072 NFTs, they would generate close to £10 million. Not bad, from their perspective, for what is essentially money for old rope. Except, Liverpool didn't sell all 171,072 NFTs. In fact, about 90% of the listings failed to sell at all, with total proceeds generated from the collection estimated to be around $1 million, which is less than 0.5% of Liverpool's annual revenue. Of course, you could say, well, it's still $1 million, and that is not to be sniffed at. It is enough to pay Mohamed Salah's wages for a few weeks, and it has cost Liverpool nothing. But that wouldn't quite be true either, as anyone who followed the release of Liverpool's NFT collection on social media will know that it led to a pretty severe backlash from the club's supporters. There does seem to be a certain juxtaposition between the socialist credentials, certainly, of many Liverpool legends, including Jurgen Klopp, who was turned into 7,128 unique NFT customizations, and the world of cryptocurrencies and financial assets that are quite intimately tied to the libertarian right, who see digital currencies as being a way of bypassing the government and central banks, and are among the movement's biggest advocates. That is a Liverpool-specific observation, but right across the board, whenever you see a football club or a footballer post anything about crypto or NFTs, the responses on social media have gone from being largely either inquisitive or just confused a couple of years ago, to being overwhelmingly negative now. It will be interesting to see, therefore, following the example set by Liverpool, how clubs weigh up the increasing toxicity and unpopularity of these types of schemes versus the financial upsides which, in Liverpool's case at least, prove to be fairly minimal. Then you have the footballers promoting various NFTs, whether that be John Terry endorsing the Ape Kids Football Club, which bizarrely seemed to be marketed towards children between the ages of about 3 to 8, to Michael Owen's venture which he claimed would be, quote, the first ever that can't lose their initial value. Owen later deleted the tweet in which he had made that claim after he was contacted by the Advertising Standards Authority, or ASA. It is believed that the ASA felt that the claim was likely to mislead consumers, given that the only reason that you couldn't, technically, lose the initial value of the NFTs advertised by Michael Owen was because you weren't actually allowed to sell them if their value dropped below your initial purchase price. So you could buy an Owen NFT for an absolute fortune. It could be completely worthless in only a week's time, but since you couldn't sell it, as far as Michael was apparently concerned, or had at the very least been told to tweet, you hadn't actually lost the initial value. Terry's Ape Kids Football Club, meanwhile, has been a comedy of errors. There was the arguably somewhat problematic aspect of portraying black footballers who historically received racist monkey chants from the terraces as being apes. Then there was a licensing dispute which caused the entire collection to have to be re-released and redrawn without any Premier League, Champions League or club branding, and then they lost 99% of their value in about a month. Other than that though, it has been a roaring success. You might ask, why on earth would footballers want to get involved in these types of schemes? And aside from the obvious, which is that they are typically paid to do it, some of them have also developed a genuine interest in digital assets. Elite level footballers are extraordinarily well paid, whilst also being very young and living extremely regimented lives. There are therefore not all that many frivolous things in which most players tend to spend money on. A nice car, a nice house, sure, but that still leaves a lot of change left over. They also spend an awful lot of time travelling and resting, which a lot of them spend online and on their phones, giving them time to engage with NFTs and the like. If you earn £200,000 a week, you can afford to throw £50,000 at a cartoon ape, and if it goes to zero, you're still gonna be alright. The problem is that if footballers promote NFTs to people who don't earn £200,000 a week, and maybe earn something more like £20,000 a year, and they invest a significant amount of money for them in an extremely volatile financial asset, the potential pitfalls are obvious. That is probably one of the reasons why we have seen such sharp pushback recently to players sharing NFT-related content on social media, and Trent Alexander-Arnold recently deleted a tweet about an NFT that he had bought following a response that was, shall we say, not overwhelmingly positive. This actually exposes one of the wider issues with cryptocurrencies and NFTs, not just within, but also outside of football. A lot of people who have made a lot of money through cryptocurrencies were the people who got in right at the start. Many of them already fairly affluent, but whose success led to an influx of later movers looking to gain similar results. It is that wave of interest, of course, that led to early movers being able to realise real-world gains. Meanwhile, those who invested more recently are more likely to have lost money on their investments. Over the past 12 months, for example, the price of Bitcoin has halved, and it's currently valued at roughly a third of its November 2021 peak. Cryptocurrencies have attracted a lot of attention from young and often quite economically precarious people who are looking at a broken economic system in which they see house prices rising faster than their savings for a deposit, if they can save up at all given sky-high rents and a cost of living crisis, and they think, what the hell? I'm never going to save up a deposit to buy a house. Any savings that I do make are just being wiped out by inflation, so I might as well put it in crypto or an NFT where there is a chance, however unlikely, that it will shoot up in value, and then some actually useful and tangible markers of economic security, like decent housing, might suddenly become attainable. For many, they are well aware of the risks. They just see so few alternatives that effectively gambling, on the balance of things, at least seems to have some upside. To be clear, I'm not saying that this is sound logical reasoning. I actually happen to think that it is a very bad idea, but I am certainly sympathetic to that line of thought and can understand why people would feel like that. People who are passionate advocates of cryptocurrencies often seem to sell them as being both an alternative form of currency and a way of making great returns on your investment. Ultimately, crypto can be one of these things, it can't be both, and it certainly can be neither. Crypto is either money, in which case it cannot have wild fluctuations in value because unstable currencies are very bad, hence why so many countries prefer to use the dollar than their own national currency, and even the craziest of currencies aren't as volatile as Bitcoin, for example, which is itself far from the most volatile cryptocurrency, or it is a speculative financial asset, in which case it could make you a lot of money, it could lose you a lot of money, but it can't be money itself. The problem with crypto and NFTs as financial assets is the lack of value that underpins them. When you invest in other financial assets, let's say stocks or bonds, you get either a guaranteed rate of return in the form of a bond, since you have effectively lent someone money which they promise to pay you back with interest, or in the case of stocks, you have acquired equity in a company or multiple companies, and therefore your rate of return will be dictated by the performance of that company's share price, its dividend, if the company pays one at all, and also any currency fluctuations if you invest in overseas stocks, but we don't need to get into all of that. All of that is to say that when you buy stocks, or a whole basket of stocks, as any of you with a pension fund will have done, even without realizing, you own a value-producing asset. You might lose money, you might make money, but at least you own an asset that is, at the very least, working to try and make you a return. That isn't the case with cryptocurrencies or NFTs, just as it wasn't with Football Index that, rather predictably but utterly devastating for a lot of people, crashed not all that long ago. When you buy crypto or NFTs, those coins and apes aren't out there selling bottles of fizzy pop like if you were to buy Coca-Cola stock and producing value. They are just sat there in your crypto wallet, which means that your only hope of a return is someone paying you more for your coins or your apes than you paid for them. In that sense, some people have compared crypto to gold or precious metals, which also don't produce any value in of themselves, but are often held as part of a portfolio, either as a hedge against inflation or just for the purpose of diversification. But as the last 12 months have illustrated quite emphatically, cryptocurrencies are not currently, at least, a very good hedge against inflation. In fact, they have been a terrible one. And whilst gold does not produce value, it does at least have some intrinsic value, in as much as we use gold in sectors like electronics and jewellery where it does have some practical real-world use. Gold has also been considered valuable for, quite literally, thousands of years, compared to the blink of an eye with these newer digital technologies, which maybe will still be worth thousands of dollars in 3,000 years' time, but it would take someone braver than I to bet on it. It might seem as though I'm being negative about crypto and NFTs now, and I suppose I am, and there is often a lot of pushback online against people who poo-poo these digital currencies and technologies, which I expect a little bit of in the comments. I am okay with that, and if you do think that cryptocurrencies and NFTs are fantastic, and that their value is only going to go up, you ought to be delighted about anyone suggesting otherwise, since you would want the price to stay low for as long as possible, allowing you to buy up more and more and realize enormous profits. Whatever your views on cryptocurrencies and NFTs, when it comes to football at least, it doesn't seem like they're going anywhere. Crypto.com, it was recently announced, will become one of FIFA's partners and therefore one of the sponsors of the 2022 FIFA World Cup. It wasn't revealed how much Crypto.com paid for that privilege, but sponsoring the biggest sporting event on the planet does not come cheap. The Premier League, meanwhile, recently signed a deal worth £434 million over the next 4 years with a company called Consensus to acquire the image rights for all 20 Premier League clubs for the purpose of creating a collection of NFTs. Clearly, these are big investments, which are becoming to a certain extent institutionalized, but who is behind these enormous investments often isn't entirely clear. The risks to clubs, competitions, and players of endorsing, or at the very least being seen to endorse, financial assets that are extremely high risk, almost entirely unregulated, and could lose them, frankly, limitless amounts of money, would seem to be immense. But the short-term gain is clearly felt to be worth that potential reputational damage. Never before have I had a video in which I have still had so much to say in my notes that I haven't had time to feature in the video. I didn't even get to mention SoRa or the exorbitant fees that some of these companies have offered to sponsor this very channel, but this video is already enormous, of that I am well aware, and as with any introduction to a subject, you have to leave a great deal out. Maybe we will revisit the subject at a later date. In fact, given the subject matter, its current trajectory, and some of the probable fallouts, I should think that is extremely likely. Thank you all very much as ever for watching today's video. Give it a like if you enjoyed it, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so. Have a fabulous day.